Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, quite a few different styles, but I think it is fair to say that this brewery is known mainly for their different kinds of IPAs, West Coasters, New Englands and black IPAs, although we've had a fair few Imperial Stouts from them over the years as well. But the beer that we're going to have a look at today, the style of this one is one that we've had from them before, albeit the specific sub-style is one that I don't think we've touched upon from this brewery. So I have to say I'm quite curious to see how it turns out because it is a sub-style that I particularly enjoy. So very curious to see how this one turns out. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up towards Gothenburg once again, Göteborg, as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Got to get that Gothenburg catchphrase in when we're reviewing Gothenburg beers because it is just channel tradition these days. And for this review then, we are going to return to Spike Brewery. So this particular beer is called Ion. It comes in at 10% ABV, and this one is an Imperial Coffee Stout. So yeah, this should be pretty nice. This beer was released as part of the local Småskaligt assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for February of 2022, and the coffee beans that are used in this one come from Kafferäven, which is a local Gothenburg roastery. So yeah, this should be pretty nice. My very first Imperial Coffee Stout, or coffee stout of any description we should say, from Spike Brewery as far as memory goes. But as you know, if you've watched the channel for any length of time, I'm a huge fan of coffee stouts, even though I don't drink coffee regularly. And I think that really stems from the Hunter & Sons collaborations that Dugges Brewery did a good couple of years ago, actually. Hunter & Sons, of course, in Bristol in England have gone bankrupt, unfortunately, so they're no longer in existence. But yeah, Dugges were the ones who really got me into coffee stouts, a kind of iconic Gothenburg brewery, those guys, of course. So yeah, curious to see what Spike have to say about the Imperial Coffee Stout style. So let's crack on with this one then and see how we go. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Spike Brewery before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit once again about Spike Brewery. So Spike Brewery, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast, and the company was founded back in 2014 by Mats Westberg, Marcus Oxberg and Martin Johansson. So all three of these guys have previously worked in the IT industry, but it's now only Mats and Marcus that are active in the company, and they now have David de Sursi as well, who joined the company and became the CEO. So the brewer is Bernardo Gava from Brazil. He trained in brewing at VLB in Berlin and then joined the company a little bit later on in 2017, and he's still with them today. So at the moment, these guys are producing around 250,000 litres of beer per year, but for quite a long time, about 25% of that volume was used for contract brewing other breweries' beers. But the brewery itself can be found in the Gamlestaden area of the city, and they had an on-site tap room as well, which opens up on Saturdays and sometimes serves food. The original brewery was basically a slaughterhouse, so when you went into this thing to the tap room, there was like bullet holes in the walls and all of these kind of things. If you are curious to see that, you can check out my out and about video that I did there, which was filmed in about 2018 or so, if memory serves me correctly, but do go and check that out. But more recently, in November of 2021, they announced that they would move to another unit just across from the first brewery. So the new facility there will have upgraded brewing equipment, and they're going to be able to brew between 500,000 and 600,000 litres of beer per year, and they're also going to have a 150-seater restaurant, and it's hoped that it will be up and running towards the kind of midpoint of 2022. It might well already be up and running. I wasn't able to find any any real information about that at the moment, but yeah, Spike Brewery will have their new brewery up and running very, very shortly. I'm filming this one for you in February 2022, but keep your eyes peeled that they will be up and going very soon. But as of February 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 130 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. And as I mentioned to you earlier, they do a wide variety of different styles, but I think it's fair to say they are best known for their different IPAs. If you see an IPA with the name Business in it, that's usually going to be a good one. Monkey Business, and we've had lots of different ones. But yeah, they do a really good New England IPA. Their West Coasters are always good. The black IPAs have been good, and they do a very good Imperial Stout. And more recently, they've been experimenting a little bit with sours, actually, as well. But as I said earlier, as far as I can go from memory, this is the very first time I've had an Imperial Coffee Stout from them, or any kind of coffee stout, I should say. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about Spike Brewery for the moment. But if you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can, of course, check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and have a little look at the beer itself. So I'd just like to have a wee look at the artwork on this one before we open up. As you can see, this is a little bit different from what we've had from Spike Brewery before. It is a 330ml can as opposed to the 440s that we've normally had. But in fairness, we have had a few 330s as far as I can remember from Spike Brewery. But there you can see it, the Spike Brewery kind of trademark symbol, whatever you want to call it. It also says up here, enter the void. And it tells you a little bit here, espresso beans courtesy of Kafferäven. So yeah, you might recognise Raven. There's a Swedish, I forget, are they Swedish or Danish? I forget. But there is the Konken bags that you get from Fjällräven. Raven in Swedish is a fox, basically. So Fjällräven is like mountain fox. So yeah, basically the name of this, the coffee roastery is Cafe Fox, or Coffee Fox, I should say. But yeah, Kafferäven are a coffee roastery based in Gothenburg, founded back in 2013, and the main man behind that is Per Nordby. But the coffee that's in this one, I took a little note of this. It is their Espresso C blend, and it is 40% Brazilian Paraiso, 30% Nicaraguan El Arbol, and 30% Costa Rican El Pilon. So yeah, a kind of Latin American mix, if we can call it that, actually. So yeah, 330ml can, this one. This beer cost me 42 Swedish kronor. I had a little look at this on the website before we opened it up. So yeah, 42 Swedish kronor, that is about €4.20, somewhere in the region then of like £3.50 sterling, and I guess in the region of like $5.25 American, something like that. But yeah, for a 10% Imperial Stout, coffee Imperial Stout, that is pretty damn good. €4.20 for that, I think, is a very, very reasonable price. But yeah, plain silver top on the can there. Let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Curious to see what this is going to have in store for us. But I will point out that it does seem to be quite a highly rated beer. Actually, I mean, all the beers from Spike tend to get fairly decent ratings, but this one I think was like a 3.9 or something. So yeah, pretty good. Pretty good. So let's get this guy out and into the glass and see how we go. So yeah, there we are. Still quite a few drops and things. Don't want to waste this, of course, because I do love a good Imperial Coffee Stout. So before this one calms down too much, we'll just have a quick look at the head there. So as you can see, when we poured this beer, it poured with a 1/3 finger head. I would describe the colour of this one as being quite a dark beige. Not the darkest of beige that we've come across, of course, but I'll just let you have a little look at that. You can see it's got that nice dark, medium to dark beige kind of colour there. So it's about a 1/3 finger. It's faded away to just be a little wispy layer on top, and it is leaving just a nice kind of ring around the edge of the glass. But there's 1 or 2 bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few tiny little bits of carbonation just visible under the head there, but it does look very, very nice actually. Yeah, if we shine the light through this beer, there is a little bit of a kind of Coca-Cola, Pepsi colour edge to it. But yeah, I think it's fair to describe this one as a lovely kind of dark ebony rosewood colour. It's a beautiful looking beer actually. But remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. That goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. An Imperial Stout, of course, is going to have things like Carafa, Special B, Black Malt in it, so that explains the very dark colour. But 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar's caramelised, thus you get a darker colour of beer. Normally you'd boil the wort for about 90 minutes, but with Imperial Stouts they'll boil it a little bit longer. But any adjuncts that you put in or any barrel aging that you do are also going to affect the colour. And in the case of coffee stouts, you know, coffee beans are very dark. They are going to play a role in making the beer a bit darker. But yeah, definitely fair to say that this beer is a very dark ebony rosewood colour. This one, I will point out, only has malted barley in it rather than having some oat and wheats in it, as quite a few modern Imperial Stouts will. But yeah, it's pretty much black as night. I think it's fair to say that. But yeah, other than that, I don't think there's very much that we can say about the appearance of this one. In terms of what you'd expect from an Imperial Coffee Stout, I think this one, you know, pretty much lives up to expectations. I really don't think we need to say too much more about the appearance of this one. So let's take a closer look at the aroma and just see how we go with this. So I'm looking forward to this. Oh, that does smell very, very nice. Now, as I said, I don't drink coffee at all, basically, outside of beers, but coffee beans are definitely one of the most complex adjuncts that you can put in beer. So from what I understand, when it comes to coffee, it's all about the mazel, the meters above sea level at which the coffee bean is grown. And of course, as with hops or anything like this, the different areas of the world, you've got different soil profiles, you've got different water profiles, so these things are all going to affect the flavour profile of the coffee bean that you put in the beer. This one is, if we can call it, a Latin American mix. So yeah, each of the 3 countries involved in this one, and even the different areas within these countries, are going to have produced different profiles within the different coffee beans and things like this. And then of course you've got different species of beans than itself. That's another variable. So yeah, coffee beans are such a big thing. But from what I understand, it's basically to do with the height above sea level. If you grow the beans at a higher altitude, essentially they're more likely to have very big flavours and things like that. So yeah, I can see the attraction to putting coffee beans in big dark beers like this. And as I say, always enjoyed these beers since we had like the Key and the Sidamo Dimtu from Dugas Brewery and Hunters and Sons in Bristol in England, of course. But yeah, this one smells absolutely beautiful. So first impression of it is the coffee that you get out of this. It actually smells like quite roasty. I think it's got quite an aromatic roast quality to it. There's a little bit of earthiness in there. I don't find the coffee beans in this one to be overly fruity. Like quite often you can get citrusy side to the coffee bean, or you can get a kind of red fruity note. I don't get too much of any of that. I actually find this coffee, it's quite roasty. It's quite aromatic. And in fairness, maybe there's a wee bit of red fruit to it. But yeah, not really a citrusy side to it. So yeah, the coffee bean in this one for me, quite roasty, quite aromatic, then just a little touch kind of red fruity, like a blackcurrant sort of thing. So that's really interesting. But let's focus on the rest of the beer when we're describing the aroma. So underneath all of that, you can get a nice roasty toasty, bread crusty backbone there. So I really like that about this beer. Yeah, a nice roasty toasty, bread crusty backbone. Although I would add that the brown bread, you get a nice bit of brown bread on top of that, like a sort of rye bread, wholemeal sort of thing. There's Yeah, you've got quite a nice little bit of bready character in there. But on top of that, I think there's a bit of chocolate in there, you know, a 70-80% cocoa chocolate. But at the same time, it has that sweetness, that fruity sweetness that you get from those very high cocoa chocolates. Is there a bit of brown sugar in this too? I want to say there's a wee bit of a toasty, kind of, you know, highly caramelised brown sugar in there. But of course, when it's a coffee stout, an Imperial Coffee Stout, it's the coffee bean that dominates. The malt, I've always found this with coffee stouts, you get a lot of complexity to the flavour, but the aroma, the coffee always dominates. And the way that it goes together in this one, I think, is very, very nice. So it gets a thumbs up from me in that regard. So yeah, I do like how that side of the beer goes together actually. Yeah, malty, adjuncty side of this beer, very, very nice. And I think there's maybe one or two little woody and nutty characteristics to it. That's the only other thing I think we can really say about this one from the malty yeasty perspective. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things, I think there's a wee bit of earthiness, a little bit of floral character. Yeah, there's a fair little bit of floral character to this one, and a wee bit of a kind of grassy, slightly zesty note coming out of it. But the hops, obviously, in a big Imperial Stout like this with the coffee, the hops aren't taking too much of a role. But potentially, as I said, I think this coffee bean is quite an aromatic, or the coffee bean, the blend is quite aromatic in general. So maybe that's pushing back against the hoppy side of the beer to an extent. So yeah, that's worth bearing in mind with this one. Yeah, but on the fruity side of things, with this beer, it's got a how would we say? It has a very nice deep, oily kind of fruity character. I think that's fair to say. So, is it maybe right to say? I don't know if it's as sharp as raisins. It feels more like a kind of plummy note that you get out of this. Yeah, like a plum. Yeah, definitely a kind of more oily, plummy kind of thing. There's a wee bit of a figgy note to it as well. But I do get some nice blackberry notes out of it. So yeah, so it's quite an oily fruity character. Yeah, fig, blackberry, plums. I think that's what I'm getting out of this. But some of that is coming from the coffee bean, I think. But this is a lovely, lovely smelling beer, I have to say. So I would thoroughly recommend that you take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of this before you get stuck into it, as I do with pretty much every beer that I review. I think that's a big, big part of the experience when it comes to craft beer, of course. So yeah, do that. But let's have a taste of this one then and see how we get on. Lovely smelling beer. So yeah, this one is the Ion, a 10% Imperial Coffee Stout, or Imperial Espresso Coffee Stout, whatever we would say, from Spike Brewery in Gamlestaden in Gothenburg up on the Swedish west coast, as a sort of collaboration, if you like, with Kafferäven, one of the local coffee roasteries in the city. So yeah, let's get stuck into this. Sláinte, skål, cheers. Ooh. It's very nice. So, first impression of this beer. It comes in and it's very, very silky. And then it gives you a big roasty, toasty, just dry hit afterwards. Yeah. This is interesting, but at the same time, it's got quite a light mouthfeel to it as well. And that's the first impression of this one. Yeah. This is interesting, but I'm going to say solid go at the Imperial Coffee Stout from Spike Brewery. Absolutely. Yeah, I think this is pretty damn solid, actually. It's a big thumbs up from me. It was like maybe do with a slightly thicker mouthfeel, but other than that, this is a really, really solid Imperial Coffee Stout. Really like this. Yeah, let's try and break this down for you and describe the flavour a wee bit more in depth, should we say? But yeah. So, as strange a thing as it is to say, this is a very coffee-forward Imperial Coffee Stout. It almost feels in a lot of ways that it's quite a straight shooting beer in that sense. The malt base takes a little bit of time to really show its hand. So you feel that you get more and more of the malt base of this as you go further into the aftertaste. So the coffee lingers there, but yeah, the malt base takes a little bit of time to really show what it's all about. But let's focus on the middle and the back third of your palate and just see how all of that goes together. So yeah, middle third of the palate, then you get that nice roasty toasty. You get that nice roasty toasty, well-fired backbone to it, and it's like a toasty, well-fired bread crust there. So maybe a little bit of special B or something forming the backbone of this beer. It feels quite familiar. It feels a little bit Nerd Brewing-esque, and I know that Hannes at Nerd Brewing loves to use special B. So yeah, really roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust. On top of that, there's nice kind of thin roasty toasty, not roasty toasty, a nice little bit, a slightly thin rye bready sort of thing. So yeah, nice, as I say, roasty toasty, well-fired bread crust, smooth brown bready character on top of it, and that breadiness does actually sweeten up the further that you go into the flavour with this beer. So yeah, that works quite nicely. So yeah, roasted toasted bread crust, sweet kind of rye bread, maybe a bit of a wholemealy bread on top of that. And I think there's a bit of a chocolatey character sitting on top of the bready notes. So toward the back of that middle third of your palate, it has a bit more of that kind of higher cocoa, an 80-90% cocoa note. But as you come further forward, it mellows out a little bit, and I think you're getting, like a 60% cocoa thing. So you can feel the chocolate does get a little bit sweeter the further forward that you go. But you've got this kind of circle in the middle of your palate where you get some brown sugary notes out of this. So let's focus on that for a minute. So yeah, there's a nice wee bit of a kind of oily, brown sugary character to this beer. I'd say it's like it does have a wee bit of a toasty caramel element to it, but at the same time it's got like a more oily, sweet kind of thing. And yeah, the way that goes together is quite interesting, because it's not overly sweet and it's not overly roasty and toasty, but what you can feel in the malt base in this beer is the roasty, toasty, bread crusty characters just punching their way through. So I like how that goes together for sure. But let's focus on the actual coffee bean side of things. The other thing I would point out is toward the front of that middle third of your palate, there are one or two slightly woody notes coming out of this. I wouldn't go with nutty. It's not quite sweet enough to be nutty, but there is a bit of a kind of dry, woody character toward the kind of front half of that middle third of your palate. But yeah, focus on the kind of coffee bean side of things. So, coffee bean, I feel that the coffee bean comes out in that border region between middle third and back third of your palate. So, we'll go on the back third of your palate first off then. So the back third of your palate, you can feel the roasty, toasty, bread crusty side of things is a lot more bitter and well fired. So you can feel that. You can definitely feel that in there. But then sitting on top of that, there's a higher there's sort of a taller, more grainy brown bready character sitting in there too. But then on top of all of that, you can feel there's a little bit of you can feel there's a wee bit of the coffee bean kind of, as I say, the coffee bean straddles that border region and you can feel it spread in either way. So at this point, I think we should focus on the coffee bean. So for me, the coffee bean, as I say, it's got quite a well-fired roasty character to it. There is some kind of aromaticity in there at the same time. So yeah, you've got a nice little bit of aromaticity in there. And then as you move further forward back into the middle third of your palate, it gives you just a wee touch of a fruitiness, and it is a little bit like a kind of black curranty sort of thing you get out of it. But yeah, quite a toasty, well-fired, earthy roast, quite a bit of aromaticity, and then a wee touch of red fruit. But then sitting on top of all of that on the back third of your palate, you can feel a wee bit of the yeastiness there. And again, well-fired bread crust. Well-fired bread crust in there, and then a bit of a kind of thicker, doughy brown bread. But as I say, this is not the heaviest stout in terms of its mouthfeel, but we'll come back to that later. But definitely on the back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour is a little bit taller there. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, things just kind of squash together and densify a little bit more. So keep that in mind too. I think that's everything we need to say about the malty and yeasty and adjuncty side of the beer. Let's focus on the hoppy side of things. So back corners of the palate, there's a little bit of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, it definitely gets a wee bit herbal, and then the herbal earthy mix spreads forward. But as you reach the front corners of the palate, it's a little bit more kind of floral and things. So yeah. Floral aromatic sort of thing in this beer is really nice, and you get that on the front corners of the palate, but round the kind of the front curve of your palate, if you like, there's a little bit of a kind of grassy there is a little bit of a kind of grassy side to it. It has a wee touch of zestiness as well, but it's quite smooth and wet at the same time. So the green component to this beer is quite interesting. I was just checking that there. I wondered. It just says malty barley. It doesn't really say anything about hops, but I think there is a wee bit of hoppiness to this beer. I do think they've used a bit of hop in this, but just strange for a Swedish beer. It doesn't say anything about hops, but I think there is a wee bit of, I do think there's a bit of hoppy character to this one. But let's focus on the front third of your palate then. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of bready build up there again, and it's like wee bit of brown bread, but a bit of that well-fired bread crust as well. Then the base of that front third of your palate, you've got that nice kind of, you get a bit of that kind of smooth but slightly grainy brown bread in there. This is quite a high bitterness Imperial Stout, this one, but that shouldn't be a surprise when you consider the style, the sub-style. But fruity side to this beer is very, very nice. So on the top of that kind of bready base that you have, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. So toward the back of that front third of your palate, you'll get a wee bit of that sharp, raisiny sort of thing. Underneath it, you do get a wee bit of a more slightly oily, plummy kind of character, and as you move further forward, a little bit of a figginess. And then as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, it changes a wee bit too. So yeah, as you move into the front half of the front third of your palate, there's a little bit of a more, you get a little bit of a more kind of black curranty sort of thing, and on top of it you get a little bit of the blackberry, and the blackberry leaves a little bit of sharpness in there, and a wee bit of just almost like a wee teeny bit of tartness as well. But the things that linger into the aftertaste with the beer, it is that coffee bean, and as I say, it's a big aromatic, roasty, earthy, and slightly kind of black curranty flavour that you get out of it. But the way that this beer goes together is really nice, and it gets a big thumbs up with me, from me. I don't think there's anything else we really need to say about the flavour of this beer, so I think we can round off on the mouthfeel. So, mouthfeel wise, as I say, this one, it's... I can feel the alcohol going to my head with this beer, by the way, because it is 10%. And it's as I say, quite a light mouthfeel for 10%. So I would go as far as saying this beer is kind of, for an Imperial Coffee Stout, I find this one very light in its mouthfeel. It could potentially do with a little bit of oat in there to thicken it up a wee bit. But that doesn't detract from the flavour at all. So maybe that's me nitpicking. But yeah, this beer is kind of mid to top end of mid-bodied. Smooth carbonation, slightly slick, slightly oily, but I really like how all of that goes together. In terms of bitterness, it's got a... I think this is a fairly high IBU beer. This has got to be 70 or 80 IBUs. Some of the bitterness is coming from the coffee, of course, and some of it I think from hops, although it doesn't have hops listed in the ingredients there, but some of it will come from the special beer or whatever that's in the malt base too. But yeah, 70 IBU beer. Malt base has roastiness, smoothness, and a slight touch of sweetness to it. The adjunct is giving you a bit of that as well, the coffee bean. And the fruity side of this beer, it's got a little bit of sharpness, a wee bit of juiciness, but yeah, everything goes together very, very nicely in this. So yeah, flavour-wise, this is a really impressive Imperial Coffee Stout, but as I say, I think the mouthfeel could just be a little bit thicker to kind of round the beer off better. But, you know, in fairness, when I think about other spiked beers, they've always been a little bit lighter in the mouthfeel compared to some of the other breweries that are out there. And in fairness, when I think about Dugas as well, trying some of their IPAs were always light in the mouthfeel too. So maybe it's just something with the Gothenburg water, who knows. But yeah, happy enough with this beer. Happy enough. And for 42 Swedish krona, I think this is a very good value one. So yeah, thumbs up to Spike Brewery for this. If they can produce something like this as their first Imperial Coffee Stout, maybe not the first one they've brewed, but the first one I've tried, I think that's quite impressive. So yeah, we should leave it at that for this one. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Spike Brewery, and we will be returning to these guys soon. This one was the Ion, a 10% Imperial Coffee Stout, using the Espresso C blend from Kafferäven, Per Nordby, a local Gothenburg coffee roastery. Lovely beer, this one, and definitely worth trying. In the meantime, check out my social media, check out theirs, and I'll see you guys in the next review. Slange, skull, and cheers.